Hello again. Will you help me end pixelated images on the internet? Yes. Many of the assets we have on our websites can be made with SVGs. And with SVGs, SVG is an XML format used for creating vector graphics. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. So with vector graphics, we define shapes and lines instead of pixels. So we'll have circles, rectangles, arcs, straight lines. With the raster graphics, we go pixel by pixel and define a color for each one of those pixels. So one pixel after another after the next. The big drawback with raster graphics is that when we zoom in drastically on those images, we start to see those pixels. So here on the left, we have a jagged edge on that curve, versus on the right, we don't. With vector graphics, we'll determine how to display those images at that resolution and be able to avoid this kind of pixelation. So here's a most simple SVG. We have an open tag and a close tag, and the open tag has an XML namespace since we're writing proper XML with SVGs. Here I've added a circle. The circle is a self-closing tag. There is a CX and a CY attribute on it. That defines the center of the circle on the X and the Y axis. There's also a radius on there and a fill, so a fill of deep pink. And this will give us an image that looks like, any moment now, this. So my browser by default is making SVGs 300 pixels by 150 pixels. And by default, my units inside my SVGs equal pixels. So to clean this up, I can change my width and my height to 200 by 200. Since my radius is 100, my diameter will be 200, and that should show me my entire circle. There we go. I've also added a black border onto all my SVGs just to make the boundaries easier to see, but that's not standard. All right. Generally, when we're dealing with graphs, we deal with axes like this, where our smallest x and our smallest y is in our bottom left-hand corner. With SVGs, however, we're going to deal with coordinates that look like this. Our x and our y's, their smallest numbers for x and y are going to be in our upper left-hand corner instead of our bottom left-hand corner. And so if we take that circle from earlier and change that CY from 100 to 50, that's not going to move our circle down. It's actually going to move it up on the y-axis. And there we go. So with a circle, we were defining it from the center of the circle, but that isn't the case with all elements in SVGs, such as rectangles. So in a rectangle, we're going to define it based off of the upper left-hand corner. That x and that y, x equals 10, y equals 10 is going to be the upper left-hand corner, and then we have a width and a height of 180. And here we go. Here is a square with a 10-pixel border all the way around. All right, styles, SVG styles. So we've already been doing a little bit of styling on the SVGs with that fill attribute, the fill deep pink, and we can put a hex number in there if we want. Now there are a number of styles that we can set up this way as attributes. However, we're more limited when we do it this way. So if we switch over more to writing something closer to CSS with a style attribute, just like we might do on our HTML components, as inline styles. So here I have a style where the fill is :pink. I can now go further and actually make a style area in my SVG and start to use CSS selectors to define where those styles should show up in that SVG. We can go even further, and with SVGs that we're using inline in our HTML, we can start to write things like this and styles like this and put this in with our CSS files and have that apply to SVGs. Now a little more fun with one of the styles. I am going to set up a hover state on the circle, so by default it is going to, the fill will be white, but on hover it turns to orange. These are just basic building blocks that you can use with SVGs to get your imagination going. All right, JavaScript. So we can use SVGs as source files for image tags. However, I find them most fun when we start using them in ways that give us the most power we can from them with JavaScript, such as the second bullet here. So down here, I have an SVG just in line with the rest of my HTML. I'll have more elements inside of that, circles, rectangles, paths, lines. And when I do that, those elements become part of my document object model, my DOM. the API we have in our browsers to use JavaScript to change the content of our files. And with that, we can start to bring a lot more interactivity and animation into our SVGs that we wouldn't be able to do with just styles. That was a neck-breaking introduction to very basic SVG stuff, but thank you for joining me today.